For Sarah, a simple trip to the grocery store had become a public nightmare. All she needed was formula for her baby, Leo. The aisles of the suburban market, usually just a backdrop for her weekly errands, suddenly felt like a maze of judgment. Every price tag seemed to mock her, a glaring reminder of the numbers in her bank account that just didn't add up. The soaring cost of living wasn't a news headline anymore. It was a weight pressing down on her chest. Living paycheck to paycheck wasn't a saying, it was a tightrope she walked every single day, and the safety net had worn thin a long time ago. She pushed the cart with one hand while rocking the baby carrier with the other. 6-month-old Leo was sleeping, thankfully unaware of his mother's growing panic. Her shopping list was brutally short, cut down to the absolute essentials: a small carton of eggs, a loaf of store-brand bread, a single bunch of bananas, and the most important item of all, a large can of baby formula. That formula cost more than everything else in her cart combined. It was a luxury she couldn't really afford, but a necessity she couldn't possibly live without. She'd tried stretching the last can by adding a little more water than she was supposed to, a small act that left her with a bitter taste of guilt and a constant, lingering worry. As she moved through the aisles, she could feel the glances of other shoppers. A woman whose cart was overflowing with organic produce, a man on his phone loudly planning a weekend trip. They were living in a different world, one Sarah used to know, but now felt light years away from. For them, this was just an errand. For Sarah, it was a survival mission. Her stomach was in knots. She'd done the math in her head a dozen times. After rent and the late fee on her electricity bill, this was all she had left. It had to be enough. It just had to be. She finally got in line, her heart pounding against her ribs. She placed her few items on the conveyor belt, a sad little collection of her reality. The can of formula clanked as she set it down, the sound echoing the heavy weight of her responsibility. She stared at the small screen where the numbers climbed with terrifying speed, avoiding the cashier's eyes. Then she swiped her debit card, held her breath, and waited for that familiar, soul-crushing beep of denial. The silence that followed the declined card felt deafening. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, offered a practiced, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, it's not going through. Do you want to try another card?" Sarah's face burned with shame. "No, that's the only one. Can you try it again, please?" She knew it was pointless, just delaying the inevitable, but she had to do something. The cashier ran it again. The screen flashed the same merciless verdict: insufficient funds. Behind her, a man in a business suit sighed loudly and tapped his expensive watch. A woman a couple of spots back started whispering to her friend, their smirks cutting right through Sarah's fragile composure. The whispers got louder, a wave of judgment washing over her. "Some people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them," one of them said, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. The words hit her like a punch to the gut, knocking the air right out of her lungs. Hot, shameful tears welled up in her eyes. She felt the whole line staring at her, every person a judge of her poverty. Her hands trembled as she started to take the items off the belt. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice cracking. I'll just take the formula." This was it. This was her rock bottom. She could live on bread and water, but her baby had to eat. The cashier scanned just the formula. The price appeared on the screen, a number that was still more than what she had in her account. The humiliation was absolute. She had nothing. She was about to grab her sleeping baby and run when a quiet voice cut through the noise. "I'll get it." The voice was low and gravelly, with no judgment in it. Sarah turned and saw a man standing behind the impatient businessman. He didn't look like much, dressed in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. His face was weathered, and his hands were the first thing you'd notice, calloused and stained. They were the hands of a man who builds things. He didn't make a big deal about it. He just stepped forward, nodded to the cashier and said, "Ring up all of it. For her." The cashier looked from Sarah to the man, confused for a second. The businessman huffed, but something about the stranger's calm, steady presence quieted the entire line. Without saying another word, the man pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket and gave the cashier a crisp $100 bill. He didn't look at Sarah or wait for a thank you. He just focused on paying. "Keep the change," he said to the cashier, his voice just as quiet as before. The people who had been whispering just moments ago were now completely silent, their mockery replaced with a stunned curiosity. They watched as the cashier bagged all of Sarah's groceries, the formula, the eggs, the bread, and the bananas. The whole cart. Sarah was frozen, unable to process what was happening. Kindness from a stranger was something you read about in stories, not something that happens under the harsh fluorescent lights of a grocery store. The cashier handed Sarah the bags, her earlier pity gone, replaced by a look of genuine warmth. "Here you go, ma'am." Sarah finally found her voice, though it was just a choked whisper. "Thank you," she said, turning to the man. I don't know what to say. How can I possibly repay you?" The man just nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a split second. There wasn't any pity in them, just a deep, quiet empathy. He didn't give her a name or some empty platitude. He just gave a small nod, turned, and walked away, disappearing through the automatic doors as quietly as he'd appeared. Sarah stood there for a long moment, the plastic bags feeling heavy in her hands, but the weight on her shoulders was suddenly gone. The tears that she'd been fighting back out of shame now flowed freely, but this time from relief and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She looked down at her sleeping son, his peaceful face a sharp contrast to the emotional storm she'd just been through. This anonymous man hadn't just paid for her groceries. He had given her back a little piece of her faith in humanity. The story didn't end when Sarah left the store. That's where it began. The cashier, whose name was Leah, couldn't stop thinking about what happened. She went home that night and posted about it on the town's community Facebook group. "You won't believe what I just saw at the Main Street Market," she wrote. "A young mom couldn't pay for her baby's formula, and people were being so cruel. Then this man, a total stranger, stepped up and paid for her whole cart. He didn't even want a thank you. He just left. There are still good people in this world." The post just took off. Within an hour, it had hundreds of likes and shares. People who were in the line started chiming in. One wrote, "I was there. His hands looked like he was a construction worker or something." Another added, "He was so quiet about it. He just did it and left. No drama." The story grew into a local legend. The anonymous man was nicknamed the grocery store guardian. People were fascinated by the mystery. In a world that can feel so disconnected, this story was a glimmer of hope. It tapped into a deep desire to believe that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear faded flannel shirts. Finding him became a town-wide mission. A local blogger named Clara, who ran the Hometown Herald website, picked up the story. She interviewed Leah and other witnesses, putting together a detailed description and writing an article titled, "Who is Our Secret Philanthropist?" It quickly became the most read piece on her blog. The mystery was about more than just curiosity. It was about why. Why would someone do something so kind and demand zero recognition? In a time of social media and looking for validation, true anonymity felt like a radical act. But the most incredible thing wasn't the search for the man. It was the change that rippled through the town. Inspired by the story, a pay-it-forward chain started at a local coffee shop that lasted for 3 whole days. Someone taped a $20 bill to a gas pump with a note that said, "For the Guardian." The local food bank reported a huge surge in donations, with many people saying they were inspired by the story from the market. That one act of kindness had created a wave of goodwill that washed over the entire community. proving that seeing a good deed often makes you want to do one yourself. Isn't it incredible how one small, anonymous gesture can spark a chain reaction of positivity, changing not just one person's day, but the spirit of a whole town? We hear stories about hardship all the time, but it's the moments of compassion that truly define who we are. What's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Tell us your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear about the everyday heroes you've met. And if you believe in the power of kindness, make sure to subscribe for more stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Weeks went by, and the identity of the grocery store guardian was still a mystery. But the town hadn't given up. Clara, the blogger, kept digging. She felt there was more to it than just a feel-good story. She believed that if she could understand why he did it, she could understand the true impact of his actions. She started looking through old local news stories, searching for anything that might connect to this kind of quiet charity. Her breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the town's retired librarian. She'd heard people talking and remembered something from years ago. She told Clara about a tragic construction accident a decade earlier. A man named Arthur Walsh, a young foreman, had been killed, leaving behind a wife and a baby daughter. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but the librarian showed Clara a small article from that time. It described how the community had rallied around the widow, leaving groceries on her doorstep and anonymously donating to a fund for her child. The article quoted the grieving woman, thanking the kindness of strangers who asked for nothing in return. Following that lead, Clara discovered that Arthur Walsh had a younger brother, Daniel. After some more digging, she found a Daniel Walsh who owned a small woodworking business on the edge of town. He kept to himself, had no social media, and fit the description, a quiet man with the hands of a craftsman. Clara decided to visit his workshop. It was a rustic old building that smelled of sawdust and varnish. She found Daniel there, sanding a large oak tabletop. He looked up when she walked in, his eyes wary but not unfriendly. They were the same empathetic eyes that Sarah had described. Clara introduced herself and gently explained why she was there. She didn't accuse him. Instead, she started by talking about his brother, Arthur, and the incredible support his family had received from the community all those years ago. Daniel stopped sanding. He leaned against the table, and his guard seemed to drop. He never directly admitted to being the man in the grocery store, but he didn't have to. The story just poured out of him. He talked about the darkness after his brother's death, but also about the light that came from all those anonymous acts of kindness. "People helped my brother's family survive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They didn't do it for praise. They did it because it was the right thing to do. That changed me. It showed me that the most powerful kind of help often comes without a spotlight." He explained that he had promised himself he would honor his brother's memory by paying that kindness forward, not with big gestures, but in small, quiet moments. He looked for people who were at their breaking point, people who felt judged and alone, just like his sister-in-law had. He didn't want thanks. The act itself was the reward, his way of keeping his brother's spirit alive. Clara left the workshop with a deep sense of understanding. She wrote her final article, but she made a choice. She never revealed Daniel Walsh's name. She never published his photo or the location of his shop. Instead, she told the story of his brother and of the community that had responded with such grace a decade ago. She wrote about how that long-ago kindness had planted a seed that had finally blossomed in that grocery store aisle. She realized the town had been asking the wrong question all along. It wasn't, "Who is the grocery store guardian?" The real question was, "Why?" And the answer was more powerful than any name. The answer was that kindness is a legacy. It's a ripple that can travel across years, touching countless lives. The man's identity was never officially confirmed, and the mystery was preserved. He remained a symbol, suggesting that anyone could be the stranger who decides to step up. For Sarah, life was still a struggle, but something inside her had changed. Every time she mixed Leo's formula, she was reminded that in her darkest moment, a stranger had seen her not with judgment, but with compassion. And in a small town captivated by a hero, the greatest truth was the one that was never spoken out loud, that the most extraordinary acts of kindness are often performed by ordinary people, driven by love, loss, and the silent promise to pay it forward.